Hello! I've returned with a hopefully short video to sort out my thoughts on the new Fire Emblem game, and to get back into the YouTube grind. I don't know any type of insider information, so I don't have anything new to show you, but I do think I can provide some perspective, since no one else seems to have any in this bloody town. Also, I know this is going to upset someone, so I'm gonna say it outright. I've only played 3 houses, and I'm just sort of familiar with the older games. I can name like 4 people on that wheel they showed at the beginning of the trailer. Point to Piero and pretend he's Violet. I'm the vocal director or something. Yeah, thank you. You're the Patrick Seitz to my Fire Emblem cast. Yeah. Look! Violet! I know him! I know that makes a difference to some people, so if that makes you mad, I'm sorry, but I still want to give my thoughts as a person who sunk over 400 hours into 3 houses, fell in love with the gameplay and all its little intricacies, did 2 maddening runs, and subsequently found myself a new favorite game. After all of that, I became super stoked to continue following the series. So now that its newest iteration has been revealed, what do I think? Like everyone else, my thoughts are complicated. Generally, I'd say I'm excited, nervous even. When I saw the leaks of this game a few months ago, I was praying for them to be fake. I thought it was a complete aesthetic downgrade, and I still feel that way. I am now both less and more cynical than I was when I only saw bits and pieces not intended for consumers. I imagine, though, that content outside of a trailer is more telling than that tailored to make people want to buy the game. I'm going to talk about some of the elements that I'm wary of, so comment and let me know if you feel the opposite way about any of these things, or if you know exactly what I mean.
Please don't be mean to me, we've all got different opinions.
I just got a squeaky voice. I'm not out of puberty yet. Let's quickly go over the trailer before getting into my more intricate thoughts. The most obvious detail, which the trailer begins with, is that the game is an unapologetic celebration of the series' past, possibly due to 3 Houses' recent success. Therefore, it features characters from older titles as important plot points, which is a first for the series. We meet our protagonist,
Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games!
And very quickly learn we've got a Dragon MC on our hands. Cross that one off the bingo card. You've earned it. They show off a few other characters, and then it's gameplay time, and it looks good! The weapon triangle has made a return, which I'm not too stoked about, but then again, I've never played a game where it was present. I just dislike the idea of a Pokemon-esque elemental weakness system in my Fire Emblem soup, aside from the obvious Pegasus Archer weakness. Older fans of the series seemed sad to see it go, so I'll have to wait and see how it feels when I play it. Since this game is one big homage to the whole series, it would be more strange to have it mysteriously missing. The animations are fluid and the UI seems easy to read and navigate, thank God. Then we get to our hub world, Mondstadt Genshin Impact, and I start to have some thoughts, but wait, we're not there yet. The engagement gimmick is introduced and other flashy imagery is shown, and then the trailer is over. January 20th. The return of past characters is what seems to be most contentious in YouTube comment sections at the moment. The new game is being compared to Heroes, the Fire Emblem gacha game. Some believe these returning characters— I feel like I'm a news reporter. The new game is being compared to Heroes, the Fire Emblem gacha mobile app. Some believe these returning characters make it feel less like a true entry to the main series and more like a spin-off. While I don't necessarily disagree with those 2 statements, I actually don't think that's inherently a bad thing. This is more than other companies are willing to do in celebration of their series' success, which tells me there may still be a burning passion for making these games. A games? No! Damn it! A games. A passion that was so prevalent in 3 Houses. I think that passion is a big part of what drove 3 Houses to success. I'm excited to see Byleth again, so I can only imagine what veterans are feeling about the 11 other Byleths, and potentially more. Finally, I can take his ring and just get engaged to him instead. The argument that these cameos may not be a stable enough foundation for Engage's story to stand on its own is the one that resonates most with me. I don't entirely agree, but let's address those concerns anyway. There's a chance that Engage's world, Elios, may not be nearly as impressive as some of the places these returning heroes came from. This is worrying, seeing as the conflict seems to center around saving the place. There's 2 reasons I say this with such confidence. Firstly, Koei Tecmo is no longer on board. These are the guys that brought the series back around after Fates. I guess they were too stuck on Fodlan to move on to greater things, and chose to work on Hopes instead, which completely exceeded expectations, by the way. They're also the people that were so excited to be working with intelligent systems on Fire Emblem Warriors that they just stuck around for some reason. In Nintendo Dream's interview with Genki Yokota and Toshiyuki Kusakihara, Yokota stated they were responsible for the whole of programming, writing the scenario, planning for both battles and monastery gameplay, the entirety of the game's online functions, its difficulty settings, 3D modeling, mocap, effects, the UI design, as well as the graphics displayed during event cutscenes. So those folks are to blame for the UI. But they also brought it back with the really nice clock thing in 3 Hopes that was really cohesive and very pretty. Toshiyuki Kusakihara, the lead director of Fire Emblem Fates and 3 Houses from Intelligent Systems, only wrote one route, Silver Snow, which happens to be fans' collective least favorite route. All 3 of the other routes were outsourced to the eager scenario writers at Koei Tecmo, Yuki Ikeno, Ryohei Hayashi, and Mari Okamoto. But Koei Tecmo was originally brought on only to lighten Intelligent Systems' workload and speed up production. Consequently, the game ended up being about as big as my dog, which is quite small. Consequently, the game ended up being about twice as big as directors at Intelligent Systems intended, with 3 more lengthy routes that became integral to flesh out such a massive world with so many complex characters. Despite some of its more glaring issues with technical aspects and certain stories, I fear that the passion and love for 3 Houses was due in large part to Koei Tecmo, who is not returning for Engage. That isn't to downplay Intelligent Systems' involvement or dedication to the project, but rather to highlight the sheer influence of Koei Tecmo in making the game a success. Now that they're gone, are we going to lose the impeccable world building from some of the routes, which was the second saving grace of this series that cannot stop financially pooping itself? My second concern aligns somewhat with criticisms of returning characters. I'm not sure if the new game will hinge on players already knowing the returning characters' stories or not. There are 2 problems this could potentially present. Without re-explaining and developing these characters established in older games, massive chunks of the story could be meaningless to a portion of the audience. If the 12 of them are going to be a focal point, you better be damn sure they have great narrative compatibility. That sounded so so nerd emoji.
They have great narrative compatibility.
Shut up, bitch. If the 12 of them are going to be a focal point, you better be damn sure they have great narrative compatibility for the part they're let's make this there instead of they are. Suck my nuts. If the 12 of them are going to be a focal point, you'd better be damn sure they have great narrative compatibility for the part they're introduced in, or to the greater moral of the story. And if that isn't expressly clear to the audience, then that narrative is muddied. On the other hand, oversaturating their screen time to reintroduce them to players who may have missed their games leaves less room for the new characters and world to develop themselves. Also, when the returning characters are stripped away from the worlds they were created for and the characters who define them, their development may feel forced and less impactful. From what I could tell, Engage's plot seems to deal heavily with its world, so I hope enough effort is afforded to it. I think having returning characters is a dangerous game to play for a story at all. For any story. Your characters should just disappear. I think having returning characters is a dangerous game to play for a story in a series with 16 installments, especially right when it garnered so many new audience members, but I don't think it's entirely impossible to execute either. You just have to have a super broad, hands-off message about good versus evil and friendship between the protagonists, and you're good.
No, I know that sounds bad.
But we can sort of already assume this is the case. The story seems kinda goofy, silly, standard OG Fire Emblem stuff, which is fine with me. As long as the characters are good and the gameplay is fun, then whatever story those things combine to tell should be inherently enjoyable, so long as it's coherent. After the direct was over, I showed my dad, who is now a seasoned player of Three Houses, the trailer for Engage. He voiced a concern that I hadn't really put into words yet. He was of a similar mindset that the graphics, while more consistent in quality, were missing something that the previous titles had, but stated that those differences didn't matter so long as it kept Three Houses' quality of dialogue, which, at the end of the day, is really all these games are made up of. There are usually no worlds or hubs to explore, and if there are, its appearance never divulges much vital information about the world. The entire story is built upon dialogue and menus, be it supports, random NPCs, world building to surprising effect, or damn good one-liners. Three Houses did a bang-up job crafting humorous, emotional, and realistic dialogue. This is thanks especially to the phenomenal translation team localizing some of the more complex lines or jokes. I'm sure that previous titles did the same as well. I hope I can expect this from Engage, but a few factors are worrying me in that regard. I ease my concerns by saying the visuals don't matter if the story is good, but it's a circular problem that leads me back to the visuals. Each aspect of a game is important and says something about the production. When I can see cracks in that production, I can't help but feel like there may be other underlying issues. Wait! Listen, I know. People clown on the protagonist's design every time a game is announced, and I know they get used to it after it's released. I know. You're right. But this is different. I'm not hopping on the bandwagon of hating the protagonist's design. I don't really like any of Engage's designs, and I don't think that is going to change. I don't want to sound too angry, because I'm not an angry person. Listen, I don't hold anger in my heart. Yeah. I love Vinland Saga. Exactly. You may have noticed this, but I am an artist. That doesn't mean I'm going to be right about everything regarding art, but most of the issues I'm proposing have nothing to do with the actual gameplay and everything to do with the visual style. Despite having only engaged with the series recently, she said engaged, I've always thought Fire Emblem's style was something to work toward. It's fantastical and mature, realistic yet wild and creative. But for some reason, that direction and the embracing of the series artists' styles in portraits, illustrations, supports, and animated cutscenes appears to be entirely non-existent. Intelligent Systems always had hand-selected new artists for specific stories, each with distinct visions for the style of the game. It kept them fresh, while also encouraging great artists to find something massive to flex their capabilities in. So why choose a style that is meant only to be expediently translated to 3D? In Engage, there's only one source of inspiration I can find when I look at it. That is the influence of money. And I blame Genshin Impact. Let me explain. I've always had a distaste for anime with art styles like what we see in Engage. I understand that that's a personal preference, but hear me out. I think I've got a good reason for it. Think Sword Art Online. It's pretty generally hated, so I think I'll use it as my example for now. Nearly every girl in that show shares the same exact face. Every guy, something similar, unless you're an older guy, then you have the same face as all the other older guys. The clothing tells you nothing about the characters and are designed with the single intent of looking good, or looking good standing next to each other. Yes, Asuna and Kirito's respective white and red and blue and black balance out one another, but what does that tell you about them as people? Does that mean the two of them are opposites in some way? If you've watched the show, then you know that's not really the case. The reason for this is because it is marketable, especially toward the fanbase SAO intentionally cultivated. The girls all look conventionally anime, in outfits that are sort of pretty but don't necessarily mean anything in the grander scheme of the story. The main boys also look anime, with big eyes and young features, and are dressed purely to look cool, which again leaves little room for characterization. All of the initial villains are conversely depicted as old, ugly men with terrible, terrible lines on their faces and expressiveness. It feels safe, secure, because it is acceptable to the most broad audience. It seems like a waste of the visual format, but the characters in Sword Art, as far as I know, don't really mean anything at all. The truth is that safe marketing using designs populated only by unnecessary details on top of conventionally cute faces rather than meaningful traits was all they had to promote these characters. Therefore, nothing was lost. So let's bring it back to Genshin Impact. Picture of Mona Genshin Impact, please. What does this design tell you about this character? I would guess she's maybe some type of witch and a seductress? Maybe bruised love potions on the side. I don't know her, but the wiki tells me she is apparently a prideful astrologist, which I never would have guessed. My assumption indicates then that audiences will immediately latch on to the biggest details of a character and their brains will run with those 2 or 3 things. In Mona's case, that would be her big witchy hat and her exposed legs. Is there a reason that she wears that hat, or that thigh brace, or that fur collar? Is it cold where she lives? It doesn't seem that way. Looking closer, I can see smaller details that reference astrology, like the compass button on her hat, or the fact that her leggings are 2 different colors, orange and blue for the sun and the moon. But it feels odd to opt into giving her eye-assaulting accessories that reference her career rather than just having her wear something that someone in Genshin's world with her profession might wear. Let's look at another one. Ganyu Genshin Impact now, please. Now, in my opinion, she looks like she might work at the same club as the last girl and just sees a different type of client, but I know better now. That doesn't mean anything. They're trying to trick me. So I'm gonna guess she lives on a farm, because that bell reminds me of cows. Once again, I consult the wiki, and she is a secretary. All I'm understanding is what type of waifu they're supposed to be, which is entirely the point. Sharp eyes means tsundere, soft eyes equals cute moe girl, and this one means diddler. Oh my god, I hate this design so much. Okay. That's sure to be humorous. This also goes for the guys, who are either bishonen as hell or shotas. Again, all with the exact same face, just with eyes indicating their husbando type. I know the most about Zhongli because I watched the game theory episode about him. Anyway. I feel like you should say that under the desk. Okay, we're getting artsy with it. Yeah. I know the most about Zhongli because I watched the game theory episode about him. Let me do it again. The poor people who like men are starving. All they've got is Ito, and he's still skinny as hell, as if Mihoyo was scared of stepping away from the pale, slim anime boy stencil most broadly accepted by their main consumer base in China. I think some idle games like N-Stars or Love Live, which are also gacha games, are good examples of this too. So, I'm no zero-tolerance anime tittier, but as I get older and more experienced, I'm beginning to learn that conventional sexiness is most effective when used with purpose, just like every other element of design. If you wouldn't put Mona's witch hat on every girl, then it follows that you wouldn't give every girl an outfit with a hole to show her thighs, unless they're all astrologists. That's another reason why I believe these specific elements, and by extension, this specific style, is used only for marketing at the cost of diversifying characters in characteristic ways. Let's break away to focus on what I consider to be a very good use of a similar situation in Fire Emblem. For 2 contrasting extremes of women in 3 houses, let's look at Mercedes and Manuela. Mercedes, with her iconic long anime mother hair tied off to the side, gives a soft and, yes, motherly impression. It makes her seem mature, and combined with her shawl, traditional, even old-fashioned. Then, in her time skip design, she goes even further down her Christian mother roots and gets some type of priestess hat with a veil and a long ankle-length dress. But her previously soft, warm hair has been hacked off, now settling at her neck. It indicates she's embraced some type of self-authority and has been through her fair share of hardships in the past 5 years, as the cliche of women cutting their hair implies. Conversely, Manuela is more than in touch with her wild side. Her dress shows off her legs and chest, and the bright makeup on her face clearly lets you know she's here to be seen. For all those same reasons, though, along with the clearly drawn-on beauty mark and aged face, it gives the sense that she may be a little desperate. But her maturity is evidenced by her silhouette. The tall heels and long coat, along with the black pointer thing, gives the impression that beyond all that, she is still a teacher first and foremost. We can gather all of that from context, seeing the characters that stand next to one another. Because they don't all look the same, we can better understand who they are as people. It begins to feel more like they got up and dressed themselves in the morning, not like a character designer created them to be marketable. Again, I understand people like looking at anime women, and it's also good for sales in both merchandise like figures or in gacha games like Fire Emblem Heroes or Genshin Impact, but it just doesn't feel genuine to me when Fire Emblem has very recently set an extremely high standard with its designs. It's unfortunate to see them fall back on what is reliable when I believe they were so far ahead of the curve in designs that really told a story. The character designs in 3 Houses and other older titles sold because they promised a story, personality. The new art style and designs in Engage do the same as the gachas I mentioned. They promise needlessly flashy, bright visuals consumers can't tear their eyes away from, and it worries me because that means there may not be personality to promise. I start bursting into tears. It's so important to me. Alear is currently a very hot topic right now, so I figure I might as well embrace the fact that this time, the protagonist actually does look like someone's DeviantArt OC, or VTuber, and his Sora pants are quite funny to me. He even has the X belt. This is probably because the character designer for this game actually does design VTubers. VTubers whose job it is, I remind you, to look immediately eye-catching in thumbnails and broadly cute. Actually, I compare Sonic and Knuckles over here to Sora's doo-doo-ass pants, but honestly, even Kingdom Hearts has a distinct, silly little style. Even more honestly, I don't think he's the worst offender of the crime either. I do think his upper half is relatively inoffensive. The female version of Alear is definitively worse, but let's leave the poor girl alone and look at some of the other characters. I genuinely do want to stress that I hope the designer for these characters is not facing any mobs of hate, because I know this criticism is not an unpopular one. My gripe has nothing to do with them, and yours hopefully doesn't either. They were simply granted a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and took it. My qualm is with the game Intelligent Systems is potentially crafting with this person's designs. This style has a place and a right to exist, but in my opinion that place is not Fire Emblem. These two characters from Engage are some of the first we see. Immediately, the most apparent thing is that they seem to be related, maybe twins, but only by virtue of the fact that they have the same hair color and style of clothing. They're probably young, but it's difficult to tell how young because they're surrounded by characters who share the same face type and eyes, like the female protagonist. From the boy's scarf and sweater, I would guess that they live somewhere chilly, but the girl's exposed shoulders and legs quickly dismissed that idea. The bright colors could indicate that they're nobility of some type, but that concept would be lost among the apparently large cast that shares similarly bright palettes. A perfect example of the aesthetic change is this game's version of Celica, a returning main character from Shadows of Valentia. Her new, blindingly vibrant hair and chibified face is a far cry from— I love that game! Her new, blindingly vibrant hair and chibified face is a far cry from Hidari's balanced, textured colors with a face and demeanor that suggests regal dutifulness, but not without a slight hint of something almost distrustful lying behind her dark eyes. As with all of their designs, the slight sepia hue gives all of Echo's characters an ancient appearance. The art direction of the game alone could make the player feel as though they are experiencing a historic tale from deep within the past. In Engage's style, Celica loses the careful balance of off-white armor with golden linings and desaturated red highlights, and especially her unique salmon tone hair, in place of the now distracting bright pink hair and light purple eyes on a face that could easily be confused with the girl's face next to her. She no longer appears subtly regal, dutiful, or distrustful, and whatever story this game attempts to tell with her is no longer elevated by her visuals. She could just as easily be depicted by one of its characters who share the same marketable features. Let's make sure the guys don't get left out either. This person seems to be some type of nobility based on the cravat and brooch, as well as his frilly collar, but I struggle to find any tangible aesthetic of whatever place he is representing. I'd infer it's some place that's meant to be in touch with nature, due to his flower crown and the vine-like base for his brooch, but the clashing, unnatural electric yellows and blues give me pause. Yet again, it is difficult to ascertain his personality or age due to his face being nearly identical to other male leads. I realize I say that a lot, so for a positive reference, think Felix and Ash from Three Houses. The focal point of the former are his sharp eyes, accented by stark lines on the bridge of his flatter nose, both of which are traits he shares with his father. Beyond that, he has his hair tied into a bun to keep it out of his way when fighting or training, and his uniform has been altered into a vest to accentuate his arms, similar to other more active students of Garrigmach like Caspar. The latter has rounder, bright olive eyes, framed by friendly freckles on a smaller button nose. His light, fluffy hair calls to mind someone who spends a lot of time inside, and that is supported by the hoodie under his uniform as well. Come on, Rodrigue fans! Admittedly, some of the designs in Engage are perhaps not as offensive as ones from Genshin or other things like it, but being able to recognize someone as nobility because they wear fancier clothes is some baby shit compared to what you can tell from the series' past character designs. To further illustrate my point, let me very briefly look over some great designs from Fire Emblem games I haven't played. Yusuke Kozaki, character designer for Awakening and Fates, and his rich armor, flowing cloths, and desaturated colors call attention to the semi-realistic but simple faces of his characters, like Chrom. Chrom's face is distinctly determined, but friendly. His color scheme, filled with calming blues and whites, is indicative of an ally, but his one exposed buff arm makes him seem borderline meat-headed. Hidari's beautiful, painting-like colors nicely tie together complex armor with simple cloth, in an easily digestible way that's pleasing to to look at. In the case of both Celica and Alm, they seem strong both gracefully and impulsively, respectively. Chinatsu Kurohana's bright colors frame the embroidered, glamorous, and aristocratic uniforms of the noble students of Garreg Mach, but also capture the gritty and battered students now grown in a Fodlan steeped in war. Kurohana's work on Three Houses is a personal inspiration of mine, obviously. I admire her ability to perfectly capture the essence of the characters outwardly in their appearances while simultaneously having them in uniforms, all differentiated by little characterizing details. Then also, her ability to depict those characters 5 years into the future without the restriction of uniforms, and to use their new designs to subtly tell the story of everywhere they've been and what they've been doing for the last 5 years. When you're telling a complex story with good characters, the perfect character designs will almost come naturally. There's no need to try as hard as gacha series with super over-designed characters to achieve something acceptable. The character designers for Fire Emblem have traditionally always been chosen for how fitting their style was for the story their designs were going to tell. That's yet another reason why I believe these lackluster designs could be indicative of potentially poor characters and consequently poor storytelling. Most prominently though, this was unfortunately just the style that happened to be in the game that seized people's wallets, and so now it's become the new standard. Just like how Sword Art Online took the isekai genre by storm in the West, and then everyone tried to be like them, for better or for worse. In my opinion, it's usually for the worse. What I'm wondering is if we're stepping away from the unique, elegant grittiness of the old Fire Emblem games to match what is currently the most popular. That's more than a little disappointing as an artist who found it to be such a unique source of inspiration even before I played a game from the series. I know Three Houses looks kind of bad many times, but it had a clear visual style. The whole series does. It's rough around the edges, but it's distinctly Fire Emblem, and the art was probably the greatest aspect of its visual performance, be it animated cutscenes or character portraits. Now we don't even have portraits? It just feels so stale. I would rather have a unique style tailored to the tone of a story, albeit one depicted by questionable graphics, rather than a completely clean, almost plastic, mainstream, safe one that has lost all identity and blended in with the hundreds of new games created en masse that are just trying to take people's money. It's a similar feeling I have toward Pokemon's move to 3D. They've managed to replicate the original style pretty well by now, but everyone agrees that its artistic sense was lost upon the removal of the iconic pixel art Pokemon in portraits, and some sterile corporatism gained. In this way, perhaps it's not too far-fetched to compare Engage to the gacha game Fire Emblem Heroes, but by the same token, I refer you back to the idea that Intelligent Systems tends to outsource most of the work on their games to their collaborators, which in this case happens to be Gust. This is only their style. So I'm not too worried yet about the series taking a permanent turn. Not to mention the fact that beyond the visuals and potential story, the gameplay looks fun. I think everyone is equally excited for the new mechanics and the returning ones. There's admittedly more to these games than just the art, even if I feel that's where the series shines. Hence my feelings being complicated. I guess there's just no way to know for sure until it comes out. At the end of the day, I think it's still too early to say anything definitively about the writing, but if I've voiced any of your concerns, then I'm happy to have done so. If it turns out I'm completely wrong about the characters and I change my mind once the game comes out, I'll make sure to say so and explain my thoughts then. For now though, I do expressly hope that this aesthetic change isn't one the series will stick to perpetually. What about that? I need to make an outro.
Subscribe to Chamomile. We making a funny video.
Thank you for watching.
A smart video sometime.
Please subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. We make the funny video and sometimes make the smart video too.
I love you.
I love you, bye!
You can't say anything mean to a person who says I love you.